teaching was there from the very, very beginning, immediately, because for me it's a place where you can do things that you cannot do in a commercial office.
So, hello and welcome to ARCHIPCAST. It's a podcast of Prague-based School of Architecture, ARCHIP, the Architectural Institute in Prague. I'm Elan Fessler, teacher at ARCHIP, and I'm sitting here with Winy Maas.
Nice to meet you, Elan.
You also. And we're just going to have a casual conversation on architecture, on you, on what brought you to Prague, on work that you're doing, thoughts for students, and things like this. We could say maybe to be a little bit conventionally organized, past, present, and future, 3 different sections we could talk about. So I would maybe ask then first for you maybe to introduce yourself to the audience, background, you're Dutch. What was your starting as a landscape architect?
Yeah, no, indeed, that was quite an important element to the landscape architecture episode, which has not been ended. So looking back, my parents had a garden center and a florist. My mom was a florist, and my brother also. So they had some influence on the choice. Because initially I wanted to do architecture, but because of this, what they were doing, and I was helping in the business by designing the gardens, because my father couldn't do it, so I did the drawings. And when I was like 12, 13, and then executing them, I think that had a strong influence on, like, okay, I want to do landscape architecture. Actually, I wanted to do both already from the beginning, and because I studied also, my secondary school it's a bit like Donna Tartt's My Secret History, that book, maybe that you know, where you are in a kind of giant garden, a former seminary for priests, students. So it's a bit like Harry Potter, the whole atmosphere, and where the priests were gone and was taken over by ultra left-wing teachers that wanted to turn the world into a much more progressive environment, and that all in a kind of environment of villages in the southern part of the Netherlands, close to Belgium. That was a second source, because that for me it was a kind of eye-opener to be in that environment, which was intellectual, which was so connected with writers and with filmmakers and with thinkers and with scientists. Every teacher had an amazing, say, relationship with Bertolt Brecht in the past, or with writers as Harry Mulisch, a very Dutch but very good writer, and that caused, I was like, wow, what a world. I'm coming from a village where everything was about like fighting between gangs in a village, a farmer's village somewhere in the Netherlands, and then coming into this gymnasium that was like an El Dorado for me, and then being part of discussions, being part of the committee of the pupils, and that had like hidden in the ground somewhere behind trees in a forest their own place, where you pick then stuff from the chemistry department to brew your own Genever. And you can see a little bit the environment where we grew up, and there's all this kind of elements were in that kind of Harry Potter environment, and that led to kind of more a wish, I think, to be more intellectual than my background did allow for. So that combination that led to the next steps.
This filmmaking and writing and art and intellectuals, you managed to merge, I would say, all of these things together in your work. An intellectual, but also realizing lots and lots of buildings and bringing together all these different arts, all these different ways of thinking and seeing.
Somehow, yes. I think that was very influential and super intriguing for me to find a way in that. And I decided to do it step by step. Also, that's one thing. So that's why, because from a gymnasium, normally you go then to a university. But I decided to go to what they call in the Netherlands the Hochschule, the Hogeschool, which is like another level, or diploma school, for landscape architecture, which was in a very small place, somewhere in the swamps in the Netherlands, and with only 200 students, and then to learn all the plants, because it was not a scientific school. It was a school where you apply things. And the good thing about it is that you then have to learn all this things, like how are things made, how the water systems work, how many plants can you know, what are all the ecological systems, and you have to be trained in that way. That helped me also a lot. Still now I know quite a lot of plants, and every time I walk through a forest or whatever, then I pop them up. But it helps also not to stop afterwards, because there is an education which is like higher, and this meant, so I took that as a tool basically to go later than to university, and to end with the help of that first school at landscape. I could also skip the first year in the university, so it made it also more easy for me to access and there do initially urbanism, because through landscape school I could enter urbanism and skip the first year, but then also into architecture afterwards. That was a bit of a negotiation with the university, and then they were a little bit like, you have to restart completely. I said, come on. And then they allowed me also, because I did a good architecture project in the first time, to do this kind of what we call this trilogy of subjects that are connected to each other.
Landscape, urbanism, and architecture.
Yeah. So there are more people that have done it, but this is somehow you can see it back in the work. I think back in the approach, which is sometimes holistic, and anyway wants to put objects in a perspective or in a wider context. And that's what you learn, I think, more in landscape architecture especially than in architecture, which is very much object driven.
Right. Yeah, you tends to separate building from city, and then landscape is just nature, but you try to weave all of these into one. You see, even in the architectural projects, its insides and its outsides are blurred.
Or they help each other, or they refer to each other, and to make the word blurring a little bit more precise, understandable, more precise. No, that's very true. I mean, normally you see that the landscaper comes then in the end, and he has to dress up the lawn in front of the house, happily it's changing in many environments already. That these kind of collaborations are better settled.
And you talk also about like spatial planning, even our lands. This idea, I think that captures maybe all of these things brought together, rather than making a discrete object, that's its own sculptural thing separate from the world, but that they're reinforcing one another. The inside of a building is also an inside of the city, and all of this together is the landscape. That they are one thing at their base. Well,
I'm intrigued by what a small thing can do, and how it can contribute to a larger agenda, and because I know I cannot make millions of buildings in my life, which would maybe ultimately be better known, because it would also be boring. But if you design a building, it needs to have a perspective, or it needs to, because it needs to talk basically about the future.
It ought to. It often doesn't. Yeah, often doesn't. But it's so because I had some to ask about some even I think more recent projects in Tirana, the pyramid. Let's say also how it speaks even to history, can speak to not just the landscape but to people's memory.
What were you the one to know about Tirana? Should I explain it a little bit, the project?
Well, as you mentioned, that the building should speak. Yeah, that they should speak to more profound, more things beyond just themselves. You know? And as one example of a relatively recent project, also speaking to kind of society at large, even collective memory.
In this case, I think Albania is a project as a whole, not only by me, but by a country that wants to innovate and that wants to be part of the European Union and that wants to turn itself from a very poor and country into a much more wealthy and healthy environment. So with the politicians in combination, I think they are representing the population that decides in that way, has decided to make that transformation together, and it has a lot of energy. The people that live there, and it is a bit like Calimero, like you feel small but you want to be big, is what it tries to achieve. So only with a small group of people, 3 million, 2.5 million people, big diaspora. It is since 20 years trying to transform itself, and it uses architecture also for that in that operation. So because if you come from a fully communist country where there was no owner of anything because it was all state owned, where education was rather poor, to be honest, where sewage systems were lacking, where like a good law system was lacking. So that are the first things to do in a way to set up or to transform a country and to lead to a kind of prosperous direction. The nice thing was when I met at that moment the Minister of Culture, and he was looking for architects that every building would be something also beautiful or remarkable. So which I think was but then you are immediately connected also with the position of such a building in that developing country. You have to face new ownerships, you have to train thinking in law and in the rules, and you have to train to think in earthquake issues, or all that those that didn't exist already. So you have to train young people also, young architects at the schools in Tirana to do something. So it was immediately a wider role that architecture gets, but also me as a person could contribute to that. So that is and remains a fascinating project to see that happening over time from communism to corruption to a democratic and wealthy and healthy environment. So that is, and the pyramid is quite a markstone in that, because the pyramid is a building in the heart of Tirana, which is the mausoleum of the former dictator, Hoxha. And he made it himself with his wife, who was an architect. This kind of very strange communist building, which can be also beautiful, but it was not a very beautiful person, or for the majority, because he led this country as a dictator. I mean, women it was difficult for women to be in the country, and there was a lot of, say, political prisoners, and it was incredibly directed by this single-oriented people. So like them, he and his wife. And then he made this giant pyramid where he, sitting on a horse, was there.
This is what I find really great in that context about that project, that you could take the pyramid that's referring to this dictator and turn it into a gathering place for everyone, and also with color, with individuals coming forth, bursting out from it. It becomes like a democratic source. In the end, it transforms without destroying the past, and introducing these elements, not only scale, but let's say the stairs, pulling the ground up for people and letting them see from different views. As a way of using architecture to to show people also what can be.
Well, I think it's good for the listener to understand also the in-between step, because after communism, the first 10 years were chaos, because there was no idea what to do. And so this building was a symbol of protest. So all the windows were smashed. The person was decapitated. The graffiti everywhere. It was the place for the new anarchistic radio station. People went on top of the building and slided down, very dangerous to do it. So then in this transformation of the country, then there was a certain moment, what do we do with this thing? When there were in the discussions that we had with more people on that place, there was okay, at a certain moment I said, yeah, what do you want to do? You can kill the building completely, erase it, because you hate that period. So that is then done. You can also re-glorify, because some of you they liked also the communism, former communist leaders, and also there was a nostalgia here and there in a younger generation to parts of that, like what you have in the DDR also at a certain moment. So how to choose? I think I'm not going to choose. I can suggest, and then it's like the parliament has to decide. So no way that we glorify and turn it into a kind of museum. Okay, decision made. But also it is also good because it's very specific and this is the only thing like that in Europe, if not the world. And then so let's also keep the memory somehow, or in a way of it. So I told them, yeah, you can find a way to overcome it. And the building is like a way of, I think, addressing that in a couple of things. So first, programmatically, to say who is going to pay for this, because they have no money in the government. So ultimately, the foundation of the diaspora paid for it, and they found a renter, someone that also could function, that could continue the maintenance level, and that's TUMO. That's a school. That's actually an after school, where people normally in primary schools there's no money for computers, or there was no. So they are trained in the newest technologies and the newest thoughts on ecology. Is after 4 o'clock in the evening, you go there to do it. It's a very popular system initially coming from Armenia, but in many other countries now established. So it was politically an act to dedicate the pyramid to that, and they became then a commissioner of us to make that scope. But then I said, okay, but I think. It should not be completely privatized, that building, because it's us, or it's the country that belongs to it. So we did a couple of things for that, to keep it like a truly public building. By erasing all the glass from it, it became outside space, inside. So it becomes part of a park, a forest that we make in the center of Tirana. This is a concept that came from a Belgian architect, but we beautifully start in the central plaza, which we now continue even inside the building. Then you can squat the building, the structure, with boxes. So there are 40 boxes that are thrown in where the classes are, where the library is, but that you always can walk around through the building, through these boxes. But they're also on the roof for an Airbnb, but also for a school from Paris, also for the European school has their thing, but also for some hipsters that make like new machines or games that could come into it. So it's like squatting was what was symbolic of the step from communism to ownership. So that was also celebrating that. And last but not least, I think that we made the building completely accessible, not only inside the structure, but also on top of it, where you could walk by making stairs. At every rib of the building, you can go up and then lift so that the top is collective and can form maybe the new parliament.
I mean, I mentioned this project and I love your explanation of it, but I think it's important to note that all those ideas, all those interests that are driving that project that made it, it goes beyond, let's say, a function of a building or something like this, or the program has such complexity and richness to it, you know, that it serves much more than this conventional way of seeing architecture has a function and you make a building for it. But it taps into so much more depth.
I hope so. That indeed is a method to do that. And of course, this building demands for that. I mean, it was the same. It's the Albanian variant of the Bundestag, or the Reichstaggebäude in Berlin. So there is but it can be also done in a house or on a smaller scale. I'm interested in both. Maybe that comes back from landscape architecture, because in landscape architecture you have to make a view on landscapes, on the future of the river, say on the Ultava River or other rivers. So the bigger picture, and you have to be able to make a small and beautiful garden, which can also make sense. So that I think is what. So it's also the art, I guess, that also the small things do something or say something in that wider perspective.
So could you tell me a little bit about your office, your studio? MVRDV, based in Rotterdam and some other cities. Maybe tell me something about also.
Well, it's 30 years old now. We established is three of us, M, VR and DV. So together as a and I think the starting was already quite funny because we first made we had small things that we could make, and we won a competition in Berlin for Europan that has not been built anyway, but that got attention. And I think the most important moment was the moment that we entered an exhibition in Amsterdam. It's called The Power of Now, the Kracht van Heden, where in that moment artists from different backgrounds were given a place to show, very well selected by the curators. That was a highly successful exhibition, because the mix of architects, artists from all kinds of sculptors, fashion makers, that so many people came there. That was and it was so well intellectually positioned as almost pamphletic. I think that group, the Kracht van Heden, the Power of Now, that has grown enormously. Rineke Dijkstra is one of the best photographers in the world. That was in the same exhibition, to mention a name. So ultimately it was a coincidental beauty and a source of inspiration for us also and for them. So on that exhibition, the major Dutch art broadcasting company, VPRO, the VPRO, they were looking for an architect, and they saw also our work. So I still remember that during that exhibition, I was called, and I was on a toilet, and we were in a kind of small rental place. We had 4x4 meter space, half squatted, with other artists next to us, and it's kind of breeding ground. And then with the VPRO said, well, we want to visit your office, because we want to. Whoa, this is an honor, but also impossible, because if you come in this terrible place that we had, we will never get a kind of chance. So what we did a kind of Operation Sting, we called it. So we asked some friends. We rented more spaces in this whole factory. We connected at that moment cables for telephones. We asked people to phone in. We were making models, but with an artist in that place. Also, we showed there the things. We asked technicians from London over Europe to dress up and to be part of us, to come in. So they visited us, and and then they were like, somehow it fit, I think. So we were sent away in the end of the afternoon. So, we come to talk for a moment, please go out. So they talked with each other, and then half an hour later they say, no, congratulations, we would like to work. You should make our new headquarter building in Hilversum in the media park. And then so it was, we told them like a year later that but it was a kind of incredible start for an office to make them to work for kind of Arte, like the German version of this, to have for them that gave a certain liberty to architecture also, that planned in also a budget that is not 100% but 110%, so that allows for something extra. And that was also in the process, because they are television program makers, and they help young documentary makers also to do things. So they have a culture that gives space to it. So I think I tell about this because I think it's very important that we establish that in our societies, create this kind of possibilities for young people, also and to exercise on a high level immediately, on a kind of, because they were so visible, a broadcasting company, and you have to address that almost in a kind of polemic way, and that was a fantastic kickstart.
And and now your office, you're in multiple cities, hundreds of employees, hundreds of projects, also, and even still with all of this work, you're teaching also all the time.
I think teaching was there from the very, very beginning, immediately, because for me it's a place where you can do things which you cannot do in a commercial office. It is with young generation that is looking, testing, experimenting, and it's a place where you can do research, where it's a public domain, which is, I think, also a very important part. So you have to do something which you cannot do in your office. It has to be edgy, per definition. That's the role of universities. It has to activate depth through research. So see here, I think, an incredible place that I would love to be part of from that, immediately from that very beginning, and to see it also as a tool for innovation. And I never wanted to be, some of my colleagues do that, when you have an opera, then they ask the students also to design an opera. I never want that. That is was from the beginning. We talk about the city, we do hypotheses on the city, and we try to do things that have not existed yet, and that give it a wider field of meaning and experimentation. And then I think you do something as a university that makes sense, that has a public responsibility, and that gives students the opportunity to research together. Normally, architecture schools, then you have a task to make a house. Yeah, hello. It's good to do that in your bachelor, but in masters, you have to explore the sense and nonsense of architecture and the role of architecture in the world. And if you would be a doctor, and in your masters you go to a place and you will research with that professor the innovation of your heart. So why don't we as architects also see that kind of model, that you do research, that people are part of that, and that thus they learn. And the good part of European masterships at the moment is that you can, with Erasmus, etc., you can go around. So you can. The other thing that I thought was important for teaching is this agenda, but also to say with that, go around, go to find a lunatic in Zurich or in Gothenburg that is crazy or mad about wood or about animals to work with, and but then go to this other lunatic in Delft or in Prague, and that wants to explore the future city. And so I chose with that, I know, and I see that the beauty of studying is trying to go along with more people, and to cultivate a certain kind of depth through the collective research. And how to combine an individual in it might be a question from you. I always ask what a student would like to do within that. And everybody has his or her different parts. And I always say it has to be complementary or it has to be comparative. There are two ways of dealing with how an individual can be positioned in a larger picture. And last but not least, I think what would be very helpful for students is that they can publicize, so that they always end up with a book or with a publication or with an exhibition that goes around where your name is on and where you are part of this wider agenda. And that gives them more attention and hopefully also more kind of portfolio.
And it becomes part of a kind of public discourse also. Yeah?
Yes, that is, and that is what it helps so much when the public engagement is part of the universities. Mm-hmm. So to share the results of researches as quick as possible. Some universities do that. I think the Wageningen Agriculture University is fascinating. They have every week on the front pages in the Dutch newspapers, they show a new invention that they made. And they put it in, that this is what's going on, or this was just established. I think it's a brilliant concept, because you can be criticized, you're open for critics, but also you use it as a medium that inspires people and where you get immediately reactions afterwards and also goes to the next step. Research is a step-by-step method.